Mio sir, control your son. The words sliced through the music like a whip, and in an instant, the most elegant restaurant in Manhattan fell silent. Every clink of silver froze in midair. The pianist's fingers hovered above the keys, the final note hanging like a question that no one dared to answer. In that silence, a small boy's trembling hand reached out toward the waitress standing by the table. His name was Noah Hartwell, 9 years old, his legs locked in metal braces that caught the glow of the chandelier like small prison bars of light. Across the table, his father, Elias Hartwell, felt every pair of eyes in Langston Hall turn toward them. To the city, he was a symbol of power, billionaire investor, founder of Hartwell Global, the man who could buy or end a fortune with a single call. But at that moment, he was just a father cornered by embarrassment. His son, who had barely spoken in months since the accident, had chosen the worst possible moment to draw attention. And worse, to reach out to the restaurant's only black waitress. The manager, Mr. Gaines, stepped forward. His voice carried the polished sharpness of practiced civility. "This is not a dance hall, Mr. Hartwell. Our employees are not here to entertain." The waitstaff froze. A whisper rippled through the room, part curiosity, part scandal. Elias lowered his voice. "Noah, sit down." But the boy didn't move. His small hand still hovered in the air, waiting. For a heartbeat, the waitress didn't react. Amara Collins had worked at Langston Hall for 5 years, long enough to know how to disappear into the background. Long enough to understand that men like Elias Hartwell didn't notice women like her unless something went wrong. She could feel the tension vibrating through the room, the unspoken warning that a single wrong move could cost her job. Then, quietly, she did something no one expected. She untied her apron and set it neatly on the tray beside her. "I can't dance in an apron," she said softly. The simplicity of her words seemed to echo against the marble walls. Noah's eyes widened, not in fear but in disbelief that someone had accepted his invitation. Amara took his hand. Elias stood up, his voice low, heavy. "What do you think you're doing?" Amara met his eyes. "I'm accepting an invitation, sir." The piano player, uncertain, touched a tentative note. A few patrons gasped as Amara stepped out from between the tables with Noah. His leg braces squeaked painfully against the floor, and every sound seemed magnified in the stillness. She didn't try to guide him, didn't correct his steps, didn't help him balance. She simply moved with him, slow, deliberate, following the rhythm he created. They took one awkward step, then another, and then a third. Barely a shuffle, but it was his. Elias's hand tightened around his glass. For the first time in 2 years, since the night of the car crash that had changed everything, his son was moving without assistance. The image struck him with the force of memory. His late wife, Clara, dancing barefoot with their boy in the living room. Her laughter, gentle as wind. "It's not about perfection, Eli. It's about connection." He could almost hear her voice blending with the hesitant piano notes. Across the room, someone whispered, "She'll be fired by morning." When the brief dance ended, Amara bent slightly, formal but kind. "Thank you for asking me, Mr. Hartwell. It was an honor." She walked Noah back to the table and adjusted his chair with care. Then she turned to leave. "Wait." Elias's voice came out softer than he intended, almost unfamiliar. The entire restaurant waited for his judgment, the word that could destroy or redeem. He studied her face, calm, proud, unshaken. "Your full name?" "Amara Collins, sir." He nodded slowly, repeating it like something important he didn't want to forget. "Amara Collins." He reached into his jacket and held out a card. "My office, tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. She hesitated for a second before taking it, her hand steady but her eyes unreadable. Then she left, the sound of her shoes fading beneath the chandelier's hum. Only after she disappeared through the service door did the piano resume, a soft melody that no one was really listening to. Noah looked at his father. "Why did you do that?" His small voice carried farther than either of them expected. Elias didn't answer. Around them, the restaurant cautiously returned to motion, as though pretending nothing unusual had happened. But the moment lingered. A single act of quiet defiance and grace in a room built on hierarchy. Later that night, as the city lights shimmered across the river, Elias found himself standing by his window. He could still see the image of Amara moving at his son's pace, adjusting to him rather than controlling him. It disturbed him, not because it was wrong, but because it felt right in a way that challenged everything he believed about strength. In his world, power meant precision, control, perfection. But what he had witnessed tonight was something else. A rhythm that obeyed no command, yet carried its own dignity. He turned the card in his hand. "Amara Collins," he repeated under his breath, as if testing how it sounded in his mouth. In the silence of his penthouse, he realized he had no idea what he would say to her in the morning. All he knew was that he couldn't ignore the calm certainty in her eyes when she said, "I'm accepting an invitation." Down in the streets below, taxis moved like streaks of gold light. Somewhere in the city's quiet corners, a woman was folding her uniform, unaware that her name had just altered the trajectory of a billionaire's life. If you believe that dignity should never be optional, tap like to help this message travel farther. Because sometimes, a single act of grace can shake the tallest tower. The following morning, long before the sun had fully risen over Manhattan, Amara stood in the lobby of Hartwell Global feeling smaller than she had felt in years. The building itself seemed designed to make visitors feel that way. Endless marble, polished steel, and walls of glass that seemed to stretch right into the sky. Everything gleamed. Everything echoed. And everyone moved with the quiet confidence of people who believed they belonged. Amara held her purse a little closer, reminding herself that belonging was not measured by carpets or ceilings. She had danced with a child who hadn't danced in 2 years. That alone grounded her more firmly than the marble beneath her feet. "Miss Collins?" The voice was crisp, precise. A woman with a silver nameplate that read Porter approached with a professional smile that never touched her eyes. She was dressed in perfect charcoal gray, the kind of outfit that communicated both authority and careful distance. "This way, please. Mr. Hartwell is expecting you." Amara followed as Ms. Porter led her down a corridor lined with mirrored panels. The reflections multiplied endlessly. Amara, then Ms. Porter, then Amara again. For a moment she felt as though the hallway were whispering, "People like you don't walk here." But she straightened her back, reminding herself she had earned her steps. Ms. Porter pressed the elevator button. "18th floor," she said. "Mr. Hartwell requested privacy for your meeting." Privacy. The word made Amara's pulse quicken slightly, not from fear, but from curiosity. Last night, when Elias Hartwell had handed her his card under the chandelier's glow, she had seen something in his eyes that was not anger, nor entitlement, nor the brittle pride the wealthy often use as armor. She had seen confusion, vulnerability, and something like hope, though he would never admit it. The elevator doors opened to a space of glass, sunlight, and silence. The city sprawled below like a living map. The wind brushed faintly against the windows, as if reminding the room it was suspended above the world. Elias stood by the window with his hands in his pockets, watching the traffic inch along the avenues. He turned when the elevator chimed. "Miss Collins," he said, voice level. "Mr. Hartwell." For a moment, they simply regarded each other. She noticed he looked tired, as though sleep had touched him lightly and left in a hurry. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, and she sat with calm, unhurried grace. "I looked you up," Elias began. "Last night, after everything at the restaurant." Amara folded her hands in her lap. "I assumed you might." "You studied child development," he said. "Completed your degree, started a master's program, didn't finish, community teaching for several years, and..." He paused. "Co-founder of Rhythm Rising." The way he said it made her breath catch for a moment. Not because he knew, but because he had bothered to find out. "You and your sister created a pilot program," he continued. "Movement-based learning, community-centered design, accessible to families who can't afford private therapy. You've been operating on grants and donations, but the program is at risk of shutting down." "True," Amara said without flinching. "We've been rejected twice by the Hartwell Foundation. That didn't stop us." Elias inhaled softly, a breath almost lost in the vastness of the office. "Those proposals crossed my desk," he said. "I didn't read them, not carefully anyway." Amara offered a polite, steady nod. "I assumed that as well." There was no bitterness in her voice. That struck him harder than accusations would have. He looked down at the folder on his desk. "Miss Collins." "Amara, I'm prepared to make you an offer." He slid the folder toward her. Inside was a contract. Simple, elegant, and financially overwhelming. The number was triple her salary at Langston Hall. "I want Noah to have the best care," Elias said quietly. "Someone who understands him. Someone patient. Someone who can help him rebuild what he lost." Amara closed the folder gently and set it aside. Her voice remained soft, but it carried weight. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Hartwell." "It isn't about ownership," he said, caught off guard. "It's about support." "There's a difference between support," she said, "and control. Noah doesn't need more experts telling him how to move, how to feel, how to exist. He needs space to lead. You can't hire your way out of a cage." Elias looked at her sharply, but the words struck not with disrespect, but with truth. "He danced last night," Amara continued, her tone warming. "Not because I guided him, but because I followed him. He invited me. I let him lead. That's what he needs." A moment of quiet stretched between them. "What do you suggest?" Elias asked finally. Amara reached into her purse and slid a simple, handwritten card across the desk. "Rhythm Rising, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 o'clock. First class is free." Her smile held a hint of humor. "After that, we charge parents, not billionaires, so you're safe." Against his own expectations, Elias's lips twitched in the smallest suggestion of a smile. She stood to leave, offering him a final nod. "Noah is welcome anytime. So are you." After she left, the office felt unusually empty. Elias walked to the window again, holding her card as if it were something fragile. Outside, the city moved with unthinking rhythm. Cars merging, horns muted by thick glass, people threading through crosswalks like currents in a river. All of it following rules that made sense when seen from above. But last night, in a restaurant where time seemed to freeze, He learned that not every rhythm is meant to be commanded. Some must be followed. Later that evening, miles away in a quiet apartment, Amara sat on the edge of her bed. She reached under the frame and pulled out a worn notebook. The cover was creased from years of opening and closing. Inside were pages filled with observations, tiny triumphs, names of children whose stories had shaped her. And in the margins of one page, written years ago during her studies, she found a line she had nearly forgotten. True leadership begins by listening to the smallest movement. She smiled, closed the notebook carefully, and slid it back into place. Tomorrow, Noah Hartwell might take his first class, or he might not. Either way, the rhythm of his life had already shifted, and she would be ready when he decided to step forward. 5 days later, late afternoon light spilled across the city in soft gold as a sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop outside a repurposed warehouse in the East River district. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour, caught between the noise of the docks and the evening rush. Nothing about the building suggested wealth or prestige. Its brick walls were sun-faded, its windows large but smudged, and its entrance framed by mismatched potted plants that looked like they'd been rescued rather than bought. Inside, Amara Collins was taping down a corner of the dance floor mat when her sister Lena peeked through the blinds. Amar, she whispered. Is that what I think it is? Amara didn't look up. If you think it's a delivery truck, then no. It's a Bentley, Lena hissed. A very shiny one. Men like him don't come in here. Amara gave a slow smile. Don't underestimate a determined son. Lena watched as the rear door opened and Elias Hartwell stepped out. He wore no tie today, just a dark shirt with sleeves pushed up, as if he had changed his mind twice before settling on something that felt less intimidating. Then Noah emerged, bracing himself carefully as he adjusted the lighter support brace along his left leg. Noah looked up at the building with an expression that mixed fear, curiosity, and something more fragile. Hope held between two fingers. Inside the warehouse, the room was already alive with motion. A girl in a wheelchair spun herself in circles, laughing. A little boy with a prosthetic leg tapped a steady pattern on the floor with the confidence of someone marking territory. A teenager with limited motor control made sweeping, slow arcs in the air with his arms while a volunteer mirrored him, matching the rhythm he created. Across one entire wall, painted with irregular strokes in the vivid colors chosen by the families, were the words, "Your rhythm, your rules." When Elias stepped inside, the sounds hit him. Shoes scuffing, soft laughter, a hum of music from an old speaker. The atmosphere felt everything Langston Hall wasn't. Unscripted, imperfect, brimming with life. Noah clutched his father's hand. Is this okay? Elias squeezed gently. You tell me. Amara approached, calm as always. Good afternoon, Mr. Hartwell, and welcome back, Noah. She kneeled so she could meet the boy's eyes. We don't have a script here, just space. You ready to see how it feels? Noah nodded cautiously. Elias surveyed the room, brows furrowing. It looks chaotic. Amara smiled. There is structure. It's just not the one you recognize. She gestured toward a girl guiding her wheelchair in figure eights. That's motor planning. Her brain practicing how to make a decision and carry it through. She pointed to a boy choosing which rhythm to follow from the speaker. That's sensory regulation. He's learning which sounds feel safe. She nodded toward a child and volunteer moving arm in arm at different tempos. That's body autonomy, letting them choose how close or far they want someone. Her explanations were soft, bedtime smooth, No scientific jargon. Instead of saying neuroplasticity, she said, the brain learns new paths when we move in ways that feel free. Instead of talking about adaptive therapy models, she said, we teach the children to listen to their bodies, and we listen with them. Elias watched it unfold. Slowly, the room that had first looked wild began to take on a hidden order, a choreography that wasn't choreographed, a rhythm woven from choice. Then a door opened at the back of the studio, and a woman stepped through with the kind of presence that softened a space. Dr. Evelyn Rhodes, her long silver braids tied back loosely, leaned slightly on a carved cane. Her eyes were clear, steady, amused. "Well," she said, her voice deep and confident, "if it isn't Mr. Hartwell, I suppose you're here to inspect the chaos that terrified your fund managers." Elias straightened. "Dr. Rhodes, I didn't know you were involved." She tilted her head. "Hartwell Foundation rejected our proposals twice. You'd know that if you'd read beyond the executive summary." Amara shot her a small warning glance. But Dr. Rhodes only smiled. "Relax, child. Honesty doesn't bite." Noah tugged Amara's sleeve. "Do I have to dance in front of everyone?" "Not unless you want to," she said. "But you can try something small. Just one choice." "One choice?" "Yes. You get to decide what your first move is." Noah took that in. The silence stretched. Then he stepped forward, just a fraction. Not a dance, not a performance, just a shift of weight that said, "I'm here." Amara clapped softly. "Excellent first move." That seemed to free something in him. He moved again, small, cautious, guided not by instruction but by curiosity. The other children watched, some nodding, as if recognizing a familiar beginning. Lena leaned over to Dr. Rhodes. "He's a little scared." "All the best beginnings start in fear," Dr. Rhodes murmured. "Courage is the second step." Elias walked alongside Amara, observing carefully. "I didn't know he could choose like that," he admitted. "Most children can," Amara said, "but adults forget to give them the chance." He glanced at her. "I didn't realize you co-authored those proposals." "You weren't supposed to," she replied softly. "We wrote for the children, not for recognition." The words landed with more weight than volume. At the far end of the room, Noah had begun moving to the beat of a soft drum pattern that another child tapped out. He wasn't dancing exactly. He was adjusting, finding a way to exist inside a rhythm that didn't scare him. Elias watched him, shoulders lowering, tension leaving in slow increments. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't instructing, negotiating, or protecting. He was witnessing. The difference was subtle, but profound. Eventually, as the class shifted into cool-down stretches, Elias turned back to Amara. "I didn't come here expecting anything," he said quietly. "I thought I would just observe." "And?" she asked. "And it appears," he said slowly, "that I've been reading my own son wrong." Amara's reply was gentle. "He's learning to lead, Mr. Hartwell. All you have to do is let him set the pace." He looked down at the floor, at the scuffed mats and worn tape lines and sunlight spilling across the wood. It was nothing like the polished elegance he knew, but it felt truer. When they left the building, the Bentley's glossy surface reflected the warehouse's faded brick like a bridge between worlds. Noah turned back once, watching as a child waved from the door. "Can we come again?" he asked. Elias didn't trust his voice. He only nodded. Morning light drifted lazily across the floor of Rhythm Rising, soft and honey-colored, as if even the sun understood this place needed gentleness more than brilliance. Amara arrived early, unlocking the front door with a quiet click, expecting a slow start to the day. A few families dropping by, Dr. Rhodes setting up her notes, children trickling in with hesitant steps. She did not expect a news van. The Chronicle Media Group logo was unmistakable, blue lettering on a white background, a symbol of polished storytelling and messy truths. 2 crew members were already unloading equipment, their movements efficient and practiced. A cameraman adjusted his shoulder rig. Another tested a mic, tapping it lightly. The soft pops echoed across the quiet street like distant footsteps. Amara froze on the threshold. For a breath, she felt the familiar pinch of dread. Publicity had teeth. It could lift a program up, or tear its spirit apart before it found its footing. And today wasn't supposed to be about cameras. Today was supposed to be about the children. A voice cut through her thoughts. "Morning, Miss Collins." Dr. Evelyn Rhodes stepped out from behind the doorway, sipping tea from a chipped mug. "Don't look so alarmed. I invited them." "You what?" Dr. Rhodes shrugged. "We released preliminary results last night. I assumed they'd want to cover the story." Her tone was casual, but her eyes held a quiet fire. If no one tells the world why our work matters, the world won't bother to care. Before Amara could respond, she heard a familiar engine rumble, the Bentley turning onto the street. Elias Hartwell stepped out with Noah beside him. The boy walked with cautious control, the lighter brace absorbing some of the weight. His features brightened when he saw Amara. Something in his gaze softened when he noticed the camera crew. But Elias's expression tightened. "What is all this?" he asked, voice controlled but clipped. "Press," Dr. Rhodes said simply. "I can see that," Elias replied. "Why?" "Because you canceled our meeting," Dr. Rhodes said without apology. "We found another door." Amara shot her a look, gentle but pleading for diplomacy. Dr. Rhodes pretended not to notice. Elias exhaled. "You could have told me." "You would have asked us to cancel," Dr. Rhodes said. "And today isn't about you." The words landed sharply in the morning air. Amara stepped between them, not with force, but with quiet steadiness. "Let's take a walk inside," she said. "There's something you should see." They moved into the main hall. On the far wall, Amara had created a display over the past year. Hundreds of photos of children, snapshots of small victories, shaky first movements, smiles blooming after tears. Each picture had a handwritten note. "Took 2 steps today. Found balance after trying 5 times. Chose her own rhythm." Elias slowed as he walked past them. Noah pointed at a photo of a girl in a wheelchair lifting her arms with joy. "She could barely move last year," he said quietly. "She wanted to feel the air rush by her," Amara said. "So she learned how to spin. That's her victory." At the end of the wall was an empty frame. Nothing inside, just a simple wooden border with a small label beneath it. "Next, our full center, room for 600 children a year." Elias stopped. His eyes traced the frame as if trying to imagine the children who might fill that space. 600, he murmured. "You think you can reach that many?" "We know we can," Amara said. "If we survive another year." He looked at her sharply. "And this," he gestured toward the reporters setting up at the entrance, "is your way of surviving." "It's our way of being seen," she corrected. "You think we blindsided you, but you blindsided us first when you canceled our meeting. We adapt. We always have." Elias's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Before they could say more, one of the reporters approached. a woman with soft curls, warm eyes, and a carefully neutral tone. "Miss Collins? Dr. Rhodes? We're almost ready to begin. We'd love to follow one of your classes today, if that's all right." Amara glanced at Elias. For a moment, she saw the tension in his shoulders, the instinctive fear that his son would become a spectacle, an image to consume rather than a child learning to breathe again. She placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Only what he's comfortable with," she said. "We follow his lead." The reporter nodded. "Of course." Noah's fingers fidgeted at his side. Can I not be interviewed?" "You don't have to say a word," Amara said gently. "Your steps speak for you." He relaxed at that. Class began slowly. Children trickled in with parents trailing behind them. The cameraman moved carefully around the room, capturing moments without disturbing them. A gentle piano track played over the speakers, grounding the air with warmth. Amara led the warm-up, but she didn't instruct. She mirrored. Hands rising, hands falling, moving as the children moved. Her voice was soft, a thread guiding them without tightening around them. Elias watched from the side, expression shifting from worry to contemplation. At times his breath caught when Noah tried something new, a wider step, a shift of weight, an experimental sway. But he didn't interrupt. He didn't hover. He let the moment unfold. Halfway through, Dr. Rhodes joined Noah, matching the rhythm he started, slow, then slightly faster. He followed her for a second, then she followed him, the exchange seamless, like two quiet waves meeting. The room, lively a moment ago, began to hush. Even the cameras stilled. Something was happening. A moment of stillness, a breath held in unison. In that pause, Noah reached down and unbuckled the latch on one of his braces. The metal piece swung softly against his leg. He planted his foot, balanced. The air shimmered with an almost sacred quiet. Elias froze. Noah lifted his chin. And then, one step. Tiny, wobbly, imperfect, but his. Cameras flashed. The other children gasped, then cheered. Amara pressed her hand to her heart. Dr. Rhodes closed her eyes for a second, acknowledging the gravity of what the world had just witnessed. Elias took one breath too many, and for a moment he feared he might break open in front of everyone. He had two choices: to step backward into pride and control, or forward into humility and truth. Noah's small step made the decision for him. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. It wasn't the kind of silence born from shock or fear. This one felt reverent, the kind that settles over a space when something sacred unfolds. Even the camera crew seemed to recognize it. Their movements stilled, as if afraid the smallest sound might break the moment. Noah stood there in the center of the studio, one brace unfastened, the metal piece hanging gently against his leg like a quiet, forgotten echo. His foot pressed into the mat with a tremble that traveled all the way up his small frame. But his eyes held something new, something steady. He took a second step. This one wasn't cleaner or easier. It was messy, hesitant, almost collapsing in on itself, but unmistakably his. The room exhaled as one, a soft wave of awe that rolled through the air. A child in a wheelchair clapped first. A short burst of joy that rang brightly. Keisha, always quick with emotions, gasped and covered her mouth, her eyes wide. Mateo pounded a celebratory beat on the floor with his hands, tapping a rhythm he seemed to invent just for this moment. Arya leaned forward, whispering, "He did it." Then the cheers broke open, pure and unrestrained, the kind of happiness only children can unleash without filtering it through thought or pride. Elias felt something inside his chest twist sharply. For the first time in what felt like ages, he wasn't watching his son fail, struggle, or shrink into himself. He was watching him lead, and Elias wasn't ready. He had told himself he had come here today to understand, to gather information, to observe. But observation was a safe word, a distance word, and this moment didn't allow distance. As Noah took a shaky third step, completing the quiet motif Amara had once whispered to him, lead, follow, trust, Elias felt the world tilt softly under his feet. Amara stepped closer, not to help, not to guide, but simply to make sure Noah knew she was there if he needed her. But she didn't take his arm. She didn't adjust his stance. She didn't whisper instructions. She let him choose, and Noah chose another step. The Chronicle reporter raised her mic, voice trembling slightly. "Miss Collins," she whispered, "is this normal progress?" Amara's voice was soft, but every word held steady meaning. "Progress isn't measured in perfection," she said. "It's measured in courage." The cameraman zoomed in on Noah, not with spectacle, but with care. He filmed the way Noah breathed through the wobble, how he paused and adjusted, how his face held steady concentration. This wasn't a miracle moment. It was a hard-earned one, a choice made visible. Noah stopped after his fifth step. He looked back at his father. His lower lip trembled for a moment, as if unsure whether this was triumph or trouble. "Dad," he murmured, "I did it." Elias felt the world press in on him from every direction. The cameras, the parents, the children, the staff, the bright open space waiting for his reaction. He wasn't used to having his heart exposed in front of strangers. He wasn't used to being seen without the armor of certainty. But Noah had stepped forward. Now it was his turn. He walked toward his son slowly, not with the stride of a man used to commanding rooms, but with the unsure pace of someone approaching a truth he wasn't ready to meet. When he knelt in front of Noah, his hands hovered for a moment, unsure whether to touch, to steady, or simply to exist nearby. "You did," Elias whispered. His voice cracked with the soft pain of remembering what it felt like to hope. "You really did." Noah leaned into him, just slightly, enough to say, "I trust you," without needing the words. Behind them, Dr. Rhodes leaned on her cane, her eyes moist but proud. "The brain rewrites itself in the gentlest of moments," she murmured. "That's where change begins." Elias slowly stood, his hand remaining light on Noah's back. The reporter stepped forward timidly. "Mr. Hartwell, would you like to comment?" This was the moment that could fracture or fuse everything. Elias turned toward the cameras, not with the polished poise of a billionaire, but with the raw, hesitant honesty of a father who had finally been stripped of every illusion. "I'm not here to comment," he said quietly. "I'm here to learn." The reporter blinked, startled by the humility. Amara approached then, standing beside him, not behind, not before, but beside. Her posture was calm, her hands clasped loosely. She didn't rescue him. She didn't translate his vulnerability into something more palatable. She simply let him stand in it. The cameraman zoomed out, capturing them together, Elias, awkward but sincere, Noah, trembling but triumphant, Amara, steady and patient. "This program," Elias said slowly, "is where my son found the courage to take a step I didn't know he was ready for." He paused, collecting himself. "I want other children to have that chance." Dr. Rhodes raised an eyebrow, the first sign she expected him to finish that sentence differently. "And so," Elias continued. The Hartwell Foundation will fund the construction of a full-scale rhythm rising center for the next 4 years. Gasps rippled through the room. Amara's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. Full funding? Elias, that's... He shook his head gently. There's one condition. The room stilled again. Amara Collins and Dr. Evelyn Rhodes keep full independence. No corporate oversight, no branding, no interference. This is their work, their rhythm, their rules. Silence returned, but it was a softer one this time, filled with astonishment rather than fear. Amara's voice was quiet. Why? Because, Elias said, turning toward her. Leadership starts with knowing when you're the one who needs to follow. The reporter lowered her mic. Even the camera crew seemed moved, their usual stoicism cracking under the weight of the moment. Noah, beaming with an uncertainty that glowed like dawn, reached up and took his father's hand. Can we keep coming here? Elias squeezed his son's fingers. Every chance we get. The Chronicle reporter finally found her voice again. Mr. Hartwell, she said softly, what would you like our viewers to take from today? Elias glanced at Noah, then at Amara, then back at the reporter. That one small step, he said, can rewrite a life. Construction started on a cold morning in early spring, when the sun was still shy and the ground still remembered winter. The old warehouse had been emptied out to its bones, bare beams, exposed brick, and a concrete floor that echoed every footstep like distant thunder. What would one day become the rhythm rising center looked, in that moment, like nothing more than a hollow shell. But Amara saw more. She stood near the entrance, arms folded loosely, watching crews unload lumber and tools. The air smelled like sawdust and fresh beginnings. Workers marked out sections of the floor with tape, murmuring measurements, planning angles. A soft buzz of drills hummed beneath it all, a rhythm all its own. 4 months. That was what the contractors estimated. 4 months to take a dream made of practice mats, scribbled notes, and stubborn hope, and make it a home for children who moved through the world differently. A car door shut outside. Elias Hartwell stepped into the warehouse, dressed simply, no tailored suit, no tie, no polished facade. He walked with his hands tucked into his coat pockets, stepping gingerly around cables and equipment, as if afraid to disturb the work. "You're early," Amara said. He glanced around. Couldn't sleep. Still thinking about the cameras? He shook his head. Thinking about what comes next. Amara watched him quietly. There was a time when she believed men like him were made entirely of armor, shiny, expensive certainty polished for public consumption. But in the weeks since Noah's step, she'd witnessed something crack open. Elias no longer stood at the edge of a room. He stepped into its center, letting unfamiliar things touch him without retreat. A construction foreman approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Hartwell, we need your approval for the final floor layout." Elias shook his head and stepped aside. "That's Miss Collins's domain." The foreman blinked. "Sir?" "She has the authority here," Elias said. "I'm just here to learn." Amara hid a smile. "Let's take a look." They walked the length of the warehouse as the foreman explained where walls would go. Therapy rooms, open floor space, sensory areas, family corners. Amara listened, making mental notes, adjusting the plan not by instinct alone, but by what she remembered from every child she'd ever taught. "No steps anywhere," she reminded him. "Threshold ramps on every doorway, and make sure the windows stay low, not high." Children need to see the world without tilting their necks. Got it, he said, jotting notes. When he walked away, Elias spoke softly. You think of details no one else thinks of. Because most people design spaces for the adults who run them, she said. Not for the children who need them. They paused near a pile of wooden boards. Dust rose gently in the morning light, drifting like pale glitter. The sound of hammers striking nails echoed like a heartbeat, steady, purposeful. Noah was not there today, school hours, but Amara imagined him weaving through the future hallways, choosing his own starting point. The image made her chest warm. Elias pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. It was worn at the edges, as if he'd taken it out and put it back too many times. He handed it to her. I made notes, he said awkwardly, about what you explained that day. I wanted to understand it better. Amara opened the paper. It was covered with simple words and phrases written in careful handwriting. Follow the child. Let their bodies choose. Safety through rhythm. The brain learns new paths when it feels free. She looked up at him. These are good words. They're your words, he said softly. I just needed to hold on to them. He hesitated, turning his gaze toward the sunlight spilling through the warehouse windows. Dust floated like tiny lanterns in the beams of light. Amara, he said, I've spent my life trying to manage outcomes, predict things, control them. But I can't control Noah's steps, and I can't control what happened to him. There was no anger in his voice this time, only the slow ache of a man letting go of a burden he'd carried too long. You're learning how to follow, she said gently. He nodded once. It's harder than leading. Only at first. She continued walking, pointing out areas where she wanted soft flooring, where mirrors should be lowered, where sensory blankets should hang. Elias followed beside her, not to direct, but to witness. As they reached the center of the warehouse, Dr. Evelyn Rhodes arrived, leaning on her carved cane. Good morning, she said, surveying the space. Looks like the skeleton of something remarkable. Still early, Amara replied. But it's coming together. Dr. Rhodes tapped her cane twice on the floor. Walls can be built fast, she said. Trust takes longer, but I see it forming here. Construction continued around them. The sound of progress filled the space. Whirring saws, hammer strikes, murmured instructions. It was loud, but not harsh. The kind of noise that promised shelter rather than chaos. Later, when the workers took their lunch break, Amara and Elias sat on overturned crates, eating sandwiches Lena had packed. Elias looked down at his hands, then at the workers eating near piles of timber and tools. I used to think leadership meant telling people where to go, he said. Now I think it might mean standing still until you can hear where they already are. Amara smiled. That's closer to the truth than anything your books told you. He chuckled. You assume I read leadership books. You look like a man who tried. She wasn't wrong. He had shelves of them at home, most unopened, but lately those books had begun to feel too clean, too simple, too certain. Life wasn't that neat. After lunch, Amara guided him to a newly framed doorway. This will be the entrance, she said. But before anyone walks through it, I want them to see something. She handed him a small plaque she had designed, a simple piece of wood engraved with 3 gentle words. Lead, follow, trust. Elias traced the letters with his fingertip. The 3 steps, he murmured. "The children will see it every time they enter," she said. "And maybe the adults will remember what they forgot." He nodded, swallowing quietly. "Where do you want it?" "Above the main hall." Construction noise hummed around them as they walked there together. When Elias held the plaque in place, the light from the window caught the wood, making the letters glow softly. For a moment he stood still, plaque pressed against the new frame, as if anchoring a promise. No cameras, no audience, no press, just a father learning how to build something he couldn't buy. The morning of the opening arrived with a gentle quietness, as if the world itself understood it needed to approach softly. The new Rhythm Rising Center stood shimmering under the early light. Glass panels reflecting a soft sky, wooden frames warm like a heartbeat, and the low windows gleaming with promise. For months, this building had existed only in sketches and stubborn hope. Now it breathed. Families gathered outside, children holding the hands of parents, volunteers smoothing name tags, teachers adjusting microphones. The air felt charged, but not with noise, rather with anticipation, like a held breath ready to be released. Inside, Amara Collins moved through the main hall, checking final touches. The mats were laid out in even lines, their colors warm and welcoming. The walls carried murals painted by families, bright swirls, handprints, soft lines representing movement. At the far end, directly above the doorway leading to the practice rooms, the engraved plaque caught the light. Lead. Follow. Trust. The 3 steps, 3 small truths, glowed gently, as if waiting for the day to begin. Near the entrance, Noah Hartwell stood adjusting the light brace around his right leg. It was thinner now, supportive without restricting him. He had grown since that first day in the warehouse, not taller, though there was that too, but steadier, more certain. His world had expanded, one step at a time. Beside him, Keisha bounced in her wheelchair with eager energy. Mateo tapped a rhythmic pattern on his knee, and Arya hummed to herself with soft confidence. They were the small constellation that would perform the opening demonstration, not a choreographed routine, but a guided moment of shared rhythm. Elias Hartwell approached quietly, hands folded behind his back. He didn't try to correct Noah's brace or adjust his shirt collar. He simply observed, a gentle presence at the edge of his son's world. He was learning the delicate art of being near without taking over. "You nervous?" he asked softly. Noah shrugged. "A little." "That's normal." Noah looked up. "Are you nervous?" Elias smiled, small, honest. "More than a little." Noah grinned, and just like that, some of the tension dissolved. Outside, the crowd quieted as Amara stepped to the microphone. She wore a simple white blouse and dark slacks, her posture calm, her face lit with quiet pride. "Welcome," she began, voice steady. "Today is the first day of a space we built together. A space where every child chooses their own rhythm and every adult learns how to listen." Her gaze drifted to the families, then to the children gathered near the ribbon. This center is not about teaching perfection. It's about honoring courage. It's about movement that comes from inside. Movement that speaks before words do. She stepped aside, and Dr. Evelyn Rhodes moved to the front. Her cane tapped the stage twice, a gentle cue for everyone to lean in. "Children are not vessels to be filled," Dr. Rhodes said. "They are stories unfolding, and when we let them lead, we discover chapters we never imagined." She motioned toward the ribbon, a soft fabric woven by families during the construction months. Each thread held a child's name or a whispered wish. Elias stepped beside them, He didn't take the microphone. Instead, he nodded toward his son. Noah raised a small pair of scissors. The crowd hushed. With a deep breath, Noah cut the ribbon. Light applause, soft, respectful, rose around them. Several parents wiped tears discreetly. The center opened its doors for the first time. Inside, as the hall filled, the children moved to the center of the practice floor. Amara crouched beside them. "No routine today," she reminded softly. "Just start with what feels like yours." Noah nodded. The music began. A gentle melody, soft piano mixed with warm percussion. The kind of sound that didn't push or demand, but invited. The children formed a loose circle. Keisha spun her wheelchair once, letting the air brush her cheeks. Mateo followed with a steady beat tapped on the mat, grounding the room. Aria lifted her arms, letting them sway to a rhythm only she could feel. Then Noah stepped forward. His first movement was slow, like he was testing the ground beneath him. But as the music expanded, something inside him loosened. His knees bent slightly. His arms lifted, following a pattern he created on the spot. He wasn't imitating. He wasn't performing. He was leading. Keisha matched him with a spin. Mateo changed his tapping to echo Noah's steps. Aria adjusted her movement to weave through theirs with delicate precision. They weren't a dance group. They were a constellation, each point moving autonomously, yet drawn together by mutual trust. Elias watched from the crowd, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the ceiling lights. There was no prideful shine, no triumph, just wonder. Quiet, unguarded wonder at a child who had once refused to move at all. As Noah's routine came to a natural close, the crowd erupted in gentle applause, not loud enough to overwhelm any child, but warm enough to fill the room. Elias stepped forward, a reporter moving to intercept him. But he paused first, glancing at Amara, who stood at the side, hands folded near her heart. "You don't have to answer anything you don't want to," she told him softly. He nodded. Then he turned toward the reporter anyway, not with the swagger of a billionaire, but with the humility he had learned inch by inch. "What changed him?" the reporter asked. Elias looked toward Noah, who was now laughing with Keisha, Mateo, and Aria before replying. "I did," he said, "when I stopped trying to lead." The room quieted. The reporter waited. Elias's voice softened. "I learned to follow." The words weren't delivered for applause. They were spoken as truth. In the back of the hall, the engraved plaque caught the sunlight streaming in through the low windows. The letters shimmered. Lead, follow, trust. And for the first time, it felt as though the building itself breathed those words back. The weeks that followed the grand opening unfolded with a gentleness that felt almost unfamiliar to Elias Hartwell. He had spent a lifetime navigating boardrooms where voices sharpened like blades and decisions were measured in quarterly gains. But here, inside the hum of the newly built Rhythm Rising Center, progress moved at a different pace. It wasn't loud. It wasn't strategic. It was quiet, steady, and rooted in the slow rhythm of healing. And slowly, that rhythm began to seep into the rest of his world. One crisp morning, Elias stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor of Hartwell Global. The hallways, usually stiff with corporate tension, buzzed with a sense of expectancy. He could feel eyes on him, the way executives always watched a man whose choices could redirect entire departments. But today, he wasn't here to assert power. He was here to repair it. His assistant, Ms. Porter, met him as he approached the glass conference room. Her posture was still perfectly straight, but something in her demeanor had softened since the day Amara first walked into the building. "They're all inside, sir," she murmured. "HR, compliance, and the training teams." "Thank you, Miss Porter," Elias said. "And good morning." She blinked, surprised. He rarely used pleasantries. "Good morning, Mr. Hartwell." Inside, a dozen people sat around a table. At the head of the room, an HR director looked up nervously. "Sir, are we beginning with the quarterly review?" "No." Elias laid his folder on the table. "We're beginning with people." The room shifted, chairs straightened, pens stilled. "I've made mistakes," Elias said. "Not on spreadsheets, in the way this company treats the human beings who make it run." He paused, letting the words settle. "We're going to fix that." He outlined new policies. Respect standards for how staff at all levels must treat associates, contractors, and service workers. Clear procedures for how employees can report bias or mistreatment. Training programs designed to encourage awareness, not punishment. And above all, a cultural shift that recognized dignity as a fundamental part of leadership. The HR director raised a cautious hand. "Sir, this seems unusually personal. May I ask why?" Elias thought of Noah's steps, Amara's quiet defiance, the warehouse turning into something alive, the children following rhythms that no one forced upon them. "I've learned recently that power means nothing if it can't give people room to breathe," he said. "We're restructuring this culture so no one here feels unheard or unseen." A murmur of agreement followed. Then he added, "And every manager will be required to attend a course on compassion-centered leadership." Some executives stiffened. One even coughed in disbelief. Ms. Porter, however, nodded subtly. She had watched the changes in him over weeks. She had heard the lowered tones, seen the clipped edges soften, felt the shift in how he listened. "Sir," she said quietly, "I'll schedule the sessions immediately." Compassion-centered leadership. The phrase wasn't perfect, but it was soft and true and close enough to the idea Amara had taught him. Follow the child's rhythm, don't force it. In corporate language, it sounded like a policy. In reality, it was a transformation. When the meeting ended, Elias walked back toward his office. As he passed Ms. Porter's desk, she stood. "Mr. Hartwell," she said gently, "I'm glad you're doing this." He studied her face, composed, professional, but touched by sincerity. "Thank you," he said. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner." Her lips trembled into the smallest, softest smile. "Apology accepted." She paused. "If you need help preparing the training materials, I'd be honored to assist." "Only if you'll call me Elias," he replied. Her eyebrows lifted. "I can try." The elevator doors closed behind him with a soft hush. As the city blurred past the tinted glass, Elias felt something shifting inside him. His life had always been divided into two worlds, the world of business and the world of family. But Noah's step had shown him that transformation in one world inevitably ripples through the other. By afternoon, Elias was back at Rhythm Rising. The scent of polished wood, fabric mats, and soft music welcomed him. He had started visiting unannounced, sometimes just to sit quietly and watch Noah engage with the rhythm of the room. Today, Amara was guiding a small group exercise. The children lay on mats, lifting their arms slowly, synchronizing movements with breath. No rigid instructions, no counted beats, just breath rising and falling like gentle waves. Elias leaned against the doorframe until the session ended. Noah's getting stronger, Amara said, wiping her hands on a towel. He's holding balance longer, choosing more of his own pacing. He looks confident, Elias replied. Because he knows he's not performing, she said. He's participating. He considered the distinction. I think I've been performing most of my life. Amara gave a thoughtful smile. Most adults are, but children remind us what authenticity feels like. They stepped aside as families filtered in for the next session. A familiar figure appeared at the doorway, Mr. Gaines, the manager from Langston Hall. He stood with an awkward stiffness, holding a folder. Amara blinked. Mr. Gaines? He swallowed. Miss Collins, I wanted to apologize for how I handled things that night. His voice was brittle but genuine. I was wrong, truly. Amara exchanged a glance with Elias, then nodded slowly. Thank you. That means something. He extended the folder toward her. Our hospitality team is revising our policies. Staff training, revised conduct codes, all funded through the Hartwell Foundation. He glanced at Elias in grateful acknowledgement. We want to do better. Amara accepted the folder. Then I hope you will. Mr. Gaines bowed his head slightly and left. Elias exhaled. That must have been difficult for him. Yes, Amara said, but necessary. My company needed something similar, Elias admitted. We've started rolling out new respect standards. Amara looked up, eyes warm. You're changing more than a building. He didn't reply, not because he disagreed, but because hearing it aloud felt heavier than he expected. As the day wound down, Elias sat in the lobby, where the late sunlight touched the engraved plaque above the hall. Lead, follow, trust. The words shimmered like a promise and a reminder. From the practice room came the soft sound of laughter. Noah guiding a younger child through a simple rhythm, the two of them moving in slow, mirrored steps. Elias watched them for a long moment. Not as a father trying to fix something broken, but as a man learning how to witness something growing. Quiet repairs, he realized, were sometimes the strongest ones. 18 months is a strange length of time, long enough for a building to settle into its foundations, and short enough that the memory of its beginning still feels warm. Long enough for children to grow in ways adults can't measure on charts, and short enough that the first moments of change still echo in the halls. At the Rhythm Rising Center, 18 months felt like a full lifetime. The early morning light poured through the low windows, tracing soft patterns across the wooden floors. On most days, the center woke slowly, like a child stretching after sleep. Today, however, it woke to a low hum of energy. The lobby was filled with families, teachers, volunteers, and a few new faces who moved with an excited nervousness. Today was Open Rhythm Day, a tradition that had quietly formed during the center's growth. A day where parents could walk through every room, observe every class, listen to laughter, watch progress, and share stories with one another. Amara stood by the entrance, greeting people as they stepped in. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her expression radiant with the warmth of someone who had watched seed after seed bloom. When Lena approached, holding a clipboard and sipping iced coffee, she whispered, "We're at capacity already, and it's only 9. "That's a good problem," Amara replied. Lena nodded toward a group of new volunteers. Some of them looked terrified. "Give them 10 minutes," Amara laughed. "The children will charm them out of it." Before Lena could answer, a familiar voice drifted toward them. "Miss Collins." Elias Hartwell approached, dressed simply in a sweater and slacks. He carried no briefcase, no entourage. His company had expanded in the last year, but he seemed smaller in the best way. Less burdened, less armored. "Good morning," Amara said. "Noah's already inside with the older group." "I know," he replied, a soft pride in his voice. He ran in before the car even stopped. Amara chuckled. "Then it's his place now?" "His," Elias agreed. "Not mine." He looked around the lobby, taking in the bustle, the wall of hand-drawn murals now doubled in size, the sensory corner filled with soft lights, the new aid desk staffed with volunteers. What had once been a warehouse was now a living, breathing network of small changes and shared hope. 5 locations now, Elias murmured. "I can hardly believe it." "You believed it enough to help make it happen," Amara said. "Funding was the easy part," he replied. "Letting go of control, that took the real work." Before Amara could respond, a young parent approached. Her daughter, small, shy, holding a plush rabbit, peeked up at Amara. "Miss Collins," the mother said. "She wanted to thank you. She walked across the kitchen this morning." "No hands, just walked." The little girl nodded, clutching her rabbit tighter. Amara knelt. "May I ask what your first step felt like?" The child considered this, then whispered, "Like wind." Amara's eyes grew soft. That's exactly what a first step should feel like. The mother blinked back tears as she led her daughter toward the play area. More families followed. Parents shared stories in quiet corners of new balance, new confidence, new beginnings. No one bragged, they celebrated. No one compared, they understood. Here, progress wasn't measured by milestones, but by moments. A familiar presence stepped through the entrance next. Dr. Evelyn Rhodes, leaning on her carved cane, her silver braids gathered neatly behind her. "I hear walls don't feel like echo chambers anymore," she said. "That means it's becoming a home." "It became one long ago," Amara replied. "Well, today it becomes something else," Dr. Rhodes said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "A celebration." Inside the envelope was a letter with an embossed seal. Innovation in Pediatric Rehabilitation Award. National recognition. Amara stared at it, stunned. "I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing," Dr. Rhodes said. "Let the world speak this time." The award announced that Amara Collins' work had been recognized nationally. Her approach praised for blending movement-based learning with child autonomy, described in the committee's soft phrasing as creating gentle pathways for the brain to discover new possibilities. Elias stepped closer, his voice almost a whisper. "Congratulations. You deserve every bit of this." Amara inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Thank you." Dr. Rhodes nudged her lightly with her cane. "Don't thank him. He didn't write the letter." Amara laughed, the sound warm and easy. From the main hall, a burst of laughter echoed, a cluster of children cheering. Amara, Elias, and Dr. Rhodes turned as Noah appeared, guiding a new student across the floor. The younger boy's steps were uncertain, but Noah held his hand. Not leading, not pulling, just being present. When the boy managed 2 small steps on his own, Noah whispered something to him. The boy grinned shyly. Elias watched with an expression that carried both pride and humility. "He's mentoring now," he said, "helping others take their first step." "That's how it works," Amara said softly. "Courage spreads." As the day unfolded, Elias drifted from room to room, not as a donor or a man of influence, but as someone learning. He sat with a parent whose daughter was preparing for her first assisted dance. He listened to a volunteer explaining how they mirrored a child's movements, He observed Dr. Rhodes teaching a lesson on rhythm that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with trust. Whenever he walked past the lobby, the plaque caught the light. Lead, follow, trust. And every time, he felt the words settle deeper. In the late afternoon, when much of the crowd had left, Elias returned to the main hall. Noah was sitting near the low windows, sketching shapes on the floor with a marker. When he saw his father, he waved. "Dad, watch this." He stood, slowly, steadily, and walked 5 steps toward Elias. No brace, no help, just breath and courage. Elias's heart lifted. He knelt, not to catch Noah, but to witness him. "That felt good," Noah said. "What did it feel like?" Elias asked. Like nothing was holding me anymore." Elias closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by gratitude. When he opened them, Amara stood against the far wall, watching with a quiet smile. She didn't approach. She didn't disrupt the moment. She simply let it exist. Sometimes the strongest guidance was presence. Evening settled slowly over the rhythm-rising center, not as a sharp descent into darkness, but as a gentle folding of the day. The lights inside dimmed to their warm, amber glow, soft enough for calm, bright enough to hold safety. One by one, families drifted out with quiet goodbyes, carrying backpacks, water bottles, and small victories they would talk about on the way home. By 7 o'clock, only a few souls remained. Amara Collins stood alone in the main hall, her notebook resting on her knee. It was the same old notebook she had kept since the early days. A worn spine, pages full of scribbles, sketches, half-thoughts, and observations. She flipped to the newest page, reading the words she had written that morning. "Courage isn't a leap. It's the quiet intention before the foot lifts." She tapped her pen lightly against the page, letting the silence of the center seep in. Outside the low windows, the sky was fading into dusky blue, the first evening star flickering faintly. Inside the building, the last traces of children's footsteps remained on the mats. Scuffs, smudges, soft arcs of movement that told their own stories. She closed the notebook gently. Behind her, a soft knock sounded at the doorframe. Elias Hartwell stood there. Not as the billionaire who once commanded rooms with precision and control, but as a man who had learned the art of arriving quietly. He stepped inside without speaking at first, his gaze moving slowly across the space. "It feels different at night," he said finally. Amara nodded. "Everything slows down. The walls breathe." He took a few steps into the room. "Noah fell asleep as soon as we got home. He didn't even finish his snack." "That's a good day," she said, smiling. They stood in companionable silence, listening to the soft hum of the building. The center wasn't empty. It never truly was. There was something alive here. A memory of movement, a tenderness in the air, an echo of every child who had dared to try something new. Elias walked toward the far wall, where the last remaining children's artwork hung. A newly taped drawing caught his eye. 2 stick figures holding hands, one taller, one smaller. Under it was written, "He let me lead." He touched the corner of the paper. "That's Noah's," he said softly. Amara nodded. "He made it after helping the new student today." Elias let out a slow breath, one that seemed to release more than just air. "I still don't know what I did to deserve a child like him." "You don't need to deserve him," Amara said gently. "You just need to show up." There was a softness in the way he looked at her, something grateful, not for what she had done for Noah, but for what she had taught him. Words, however, did not come easily to him. They rarely had. Instead, he walked toward the entrance of the main hall. Above it, the plaque glowed faintly under the dim lights. Lead, follow, trust. He traced the words with the backs of his fingers, almost reverently. Funny, he murmured, how 3 simple words can rearrange an entire life. Simple doesn't mean easy, Amara replied. Children know that better than anyone. Elias turned, leaning lightly against the doorway. I used to think strength meant standing firm, never bending. He shook his head with quiet disbelief. But I feel stronger now than I ever did back then. And it's because I learned to bend. Amara walked toward him, her steps soft, almost soundless. Following isn't weakness, she said. It's listening with your whole self. Listening, Elias echoed. That took me longer to learn than anything else. She didn't tell him he'd done well. She didn't offer praise he wasn't ready to accept. Instead, she gave him the one thing he'd spent years unknowingly needing: space to understand himself. After a long moment, he spoke again. You know, 18 months ago, I would have filled this silence with instructions. I would have tried to fix or change whatever I didn't understand. His voice softened further. Now I'm learning to let silence be. That's a rare skill, Amara said. He glanced toward the practice room, where one small lamp remained lit, casting a semicircle of warm light across the floor. Is someone still here? He asked. Yes, Amara said. Noah. Elias's eyebrows lifted slightly. I thought he went home. He did, she said with a smile. And then he came back. He wanted to help a younger boy practice a balance step before bedtime. The pride that filled Elias's face was quiet and full, not sharp and triumphant like before. He came back to help someone else. He understands what it feels like to be afraid of falling, Amara said. And he knows the power of a small hand offering steady ground. Elias walked into the practice room. There, at the far end, Noah knelt beside a little boy who struggled to shift his weight onto one foot. Noah guided him gently, not by lifting him or correcting him, but by demonstrating the movement slowly and waiting for the boy to decide when he was ready. Elias watched, his expression tender as new grass. He didn't interrupt. He didn't step in. He didn't take over. He simply stayed. Amara remained in the doorway, observing quietly. She knew the moment mattered, not because it was large or dramatic, but because it was the kind of moment most people would never see. The kind that shaped a life in the quietest way. After the younger boy managed a small, trembling step, Noah cheered softly, offering a gentle bump of his shoulder. The boy giggled and wrapped his arms around Noah's waist. It was a perfect, imperfect hug. Elias leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. This, he whispered, is the step no one sees. Amara nodded. Those are the ones that change us. They watched in silence until the boy's mother arrived, gathering him gently into her arms. She thanked Noah, then thanked Elias and Amara, before leaving for the night. Eventually, only the two of them remained, Elias standing near the plaque, Amara returning to pick up her notebook. She scribbled a final line for the day. When the world grows quiet, you can finally hear the smallest steps. When she closed the notebook, Elias spoke softly. Amara, he said, there's a lot I still don't know, but I know this. Power can command a room, but it cannot teach a heart. His voice dropped to a vulnerable whisper. Thank you for teaching mine. She placed a hand over the notebook. "You did the work, Elias. I just held the door." He breathed in, steady and full. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, the last lights cast warm pools of amber across the floor. Nothing rushed, nothing pressed. Everything moved at the pace of real transformation. Slow, deliberate, and deeply human. As the final lights dimmed and the quiet settled like a soft blanket around the center, Amara spoke the last words of the night. "To lead," she said, "you must first learn the rhythm of following." Her voice lingered in the warm air, an echo meant to be carried home softly, like a whispered truth meant for bedtime. And somewhere in the hallway, the plaque shimmered faintly in the dark. Lead, follow, trust.